Hello and welcome back to the Faith and Culture Show. I'm Catherine Camp, your hostess for the show. As you know, if you've been watching for a long time, this is where we dig deeply into cultural topics of our day. Some are pleasant, some are not, but we do this in order to educate ourselves, to have those difficult conversations with the people around us. People in their culture that maybe don't really know what's going on, or they don't see how important it is from a biblical worldview perspective. We have conversations that count, conversations with an eternal perspective. Today, we're going to talk about education. Few things are as important as the education of our children. We need to get involved, and I think many parents out there realize this by now, and some are still just handing their children over blindly to the state or the federal institute organizations called schools. So we're going to talk to two very interesting women, very well educated and very busy changing the landscape of our education system in the United States of America. First, we will be speaking with Laura Zorc. She's the president and founder of Best in Ed organization. She is a highly respected and national figure in the conservative grassroots movement. She is known for her unwavering commitment to school board and education reform, protecting individual freedoms, and advocating for limited government. With a background in education leadership and a passion for ensuring a high-quality education for all, she has made significant contributions to the field of education. As the former vice president of programs at Freedom Works, Laura played a key role in national advocacy aimed at empowering parents and students, promoting school choice, and advocating for policies that prioritize individual liberty and limited government intervention in education. That's what I believe our founders had intended. Our guest joining her is Dr. Karen Hiltz. She's the vice president of Best in Ed. She is a talented expert in education leadership development and a valuable asset to Best. With her background as a former national school board advisor at Freedom Works, she has dedicated her efforts to developing curriculum and mentorship programs for school board members. This is important. She is dedicated to public service. Dr. Hiltz's career spans the United States Navy federal procurement and teaching business courses at both undergraduate and graduate levels. She actively serves and advises local and nonprofit organizations, including SBMA and ASCF, and remains involved in community groups, campaigns, and various committees. So without further delay, I'd like to bring them both on. And let's have a good discussion on how do you become involved, whether you're a parent, if you want to be a school board member, you need training because you will get gobbled up if you don't have it. So they're going to tell us a lot more about it. And welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so happy that we met in Florida. You just never know what's going to happen when you go to these conferences and who you're going to meet. So thank you for coming here to take your time and talk to us about what you do and why each of you decided to get involved with school boards.
Well, I will. One big element of that bio that you read is the fact that I am a mom. I'm a mom of 4 children, and now I'm a Mimi. And as a parent and as a grandparent, we have to get involved and we have to stay vigilant on what our kids are being taught within the school system. It doesn't matter if your kids go to a private school, public school, or homeschool school co-ops. It's up to us parents to stay engaged and really understand what's being taught to our children, because that ultimately has a reflection at home. And then it also could counter what our spiritual beliefs are and what we're trying to teach our children when it comes to our faith. So the reason I got involved was because I didn't like what was happening in my kids' school. I didn't like some of the policies that were being passed, and I decided to get involved as a parent. And as I got involved, the more I started uncovering, the more that I realized that I couldn't just stay silent anymore. So I become very active in the role of policy advocacy and just really stepping up. And myself, I ran for school board. And I know that Dr. Karen has her story to tell too, but I think it's going to be similar to the stories that we hear all across the country when it comes to the individuals who actually do step up and run for office and run for positions like school board.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have my own story, obviously. I'll try to be as brief as I can, but I guess probably what really threw me into the arena was after I, served in the Navy and then had a career in federal procurement. I, wanted to teach. And so I taught at the college level. I taught in an undergraduate and an MBA program. And I was floored, to say the least, at what little high school graduates coming into college were capable of. Yeah. And so a light bulb went on in my mind, and it's like, oh my gosh, K-12, need to focus a little bit more on K-12 here. And so, like Laura, I ran for school board. I actually served on a Christian school board before I ran for public school board, and just becoming more familiar with K-12 and, understanding the dynamics, the curriculum, the teachers, the influence in the classroom and everything else, and how vulnerable these children are. It just breaks my heart to see so many of them being led down a path that really is not beneficial for their success. Let's just put it that way. And so that's what really threw me into the arena, was teaching and seeing the inadequate skills of kids who were paying for college at a private college, which is very high tuition, and coming out with not the ability to go into a business, because I taught business courses, and not being able to go into a business environment where I thought their communication skills and writing skills were so lacking. So that's kind of what threw me into it. And then I hooked up with Laura.
That's a great team that you all make. I hear this reoccurring stories over and over again. Once the parent gets involved and you really pay attention to what they are reading, how they are being taught. And as a Christian, for me, it was, okay, what do your science books say? Do they even talk about the flagellum motor? How do they talk about it in biology? And how do these scientific facts, if you're going to give one side of the story, you need to give the other, and then move up to there. But yes, I've also taught at the college level, and I was also very surprised. Many of the students don't even know the definition of plagiarism. They have never really written a book review, or at the college level, let's just call it a little book report. I mean, I was trying to tell them there's a little bit of a difference here. So what I found was my homeschool students, they were really on top of it. I don't know if you saw the same thing when you were teaching, but I could clearly tell the difference between those who were homeschooled and those who went through public schools. So what about the Christian schools? You mentioned, Dr. Karen, that you were on a Christian board first. Did you find that they had some of the same problems?
Well, it was not a large Christian school. It was a local, and the student population wasn't huge.
Okay.
But no, I didn't find at that time that there was that there were that many problems. Yes, there's always the one child, two children that you have some behavior issues with, but they knew, I mean, they were taught not only the core subjects, but they had the foundational teaching incorporated into all of their classes from the Bible. Okay. And so they knew the 10 Commandments. They knew that the Word of God had spiritual meaning, and that there were physical and intellectual responsibilities that came with that, regardless of their age. And I love the fact, one of the things that I really love about private education is that there are uniforms. And when I was on the school board at the public school, it inevitably comes up about dress code and what can you wear and what can't you wear. And then there's the slicing and dicing with regards to agendas and propaganda and, facts and fiction and all of this kind of stuff. You don't have that when you have school uniforms. And that's one of the things, my boys, I have twin boys. I have 3 children. Our twin boys started their education in the United Kingdom. My husband and I were stationed in Europe, in the UK. And all of their schools over there have school uniforms. The only thing you have a choice about is your shoes. But everything else goes to, and I just think some people may think that's a militaristic or a socialistic or something kind of mentality, but it allows children to focus on what's important, what they're at school for, and not on who's got the best pair of shoes or the best shirt or the best skirt or whatever the case might be. So those are just a few other things.
Can I jump in on this? Because
yes,
I am seeing some concerns, not nearly like it is in the public school, but there are some concerns because as Christians, we just have to be very mindful that when we, especially now during the age of the school choice wave, where we have access to the ESAs and we have access to the vouchers and the homeschool funding, I just want parents to be aware that just because you send your child to a church for their education, you really need to look at, do their biblical beliefs align with your beliefs? Because I am seeing some concerns that as Christians, we're sending our children to these private schools, which I'm in full support of, but they have some different theologies that might not align with your theologies. For example, in Washington, D.C., outside of my apartment, there's a church, and hanging on the church walkway is the transgender flag. So just because it's a church, I think as parents, we have to be very cautious where we're sending our students. If we're sending them to avoid all the cultural issues that are occurring in the public schools. But also another area that I'm seeing some concerns, and I've received calls from headmasters asking me about certain curriculums, and they're encountering the same problems with the diversity, equity, and inclusion, and social justice, just like the public schools, because these publishing companies have captured the market, even within our Christian curriculum market. So just those areas I'm seeing concerns.
I'm so glad you said that, Laura, because our children went to an all-girls private elite college preparatory school, supposedly Christian, and they did not believe in the inerrancy of Scripture. Therefore, they took on the morals and cultural values just like a public school. The only difference with them is that they had more order because it was a college preparatory environment, very competitive for the young people. But there was a lot of social engineering going on from kindergarten all the way up to 12th. So I agree, you have to be careful. I always tell parents, go to the library when you're checking out the school, look at the books that are on the shelves at each different grade level. then go down the hallways, not just of the kindergarten where you're going to find cute little pictures and butterflies. Go down the hall of the high school. Go down the halls of the middle school. See what's there. Look in the yearbook. Do they have a GSA club? That's not Girl Scouts of America. Gay Straight Alliance is what that is. So go and look, because, and you might say, oh, just the formative, first few years. Mm. But it's very difficult in a school like that where they have bonds and relationships that start at the age of 5 or 6 to all of a sudden yank them out and try to move them somewhere else in middle school. They're already in that weird age where everything is a big deal, much less ripping them away from their friends and familiarity. So yes, so thanks, Laura, for that, because they are not all the same. They are not all on the same page. And that was what woke me up about the education and how important it is to really pay attention to what's going on. But I don't want to take away any more time from you ladies, because both of you were on school boards. And there are a lot of people who have been out there angry, they want to change things, and they want to get on a school board. But you have a method, and you are going to help people get prepared for those school boards. And depending on where you live, like you live, Laura, you said in DC, you are looking at, just all kinds of very, very liberal ideas, almost Marxist, I might say, ideologies that may not align with yours. And so if you want to get involved and change things, these people are not, they don't play nice. So you need some training and you need people behind you. So go ahead, tell us how you all operate and why it's important.
Okay, so I'll dive into the Candidate Academy, and then Dr. Karen can talk about our leadership training, because that's the next step. What we have found is that we've been training individuals across the country since 2020, early 2021, on how to run for school board. After we both come off a school board, what we saw was just there are blanket type of trainings out there that really were geared towards state house positions all the way down to county commission, but there really wasn't anything out there tailored for individuals that were wanting to run for school board. And we all know that when you're running for school board, a lot of times it's a nonpartisan position. So like you said, wearing your politics on your sleeves is probably not the best strategy, especially when you're going into an area like Washington, D.C. or Spokane, Washington, or those more liberal-leaning districts around the country. But what we like to do is we really like to empower our parents and the individuals that are looking at running with the facts. There's several areas that when individuals are running for office, that it doesn't matter where you are on the political spectrum, everyone cares about the well-being and success of students. We can all basically agree on that. We can agree that when we send our kids to school, we want them to graduate with a quality education. So that's across the board. We can agree that when our tax dollars go into a public education system, that it should be transparent and accountable. So what we do is we try to get in there and we work individually with these school board candidates to make sure that their messaging matches their community. Because if they get in there and their messaging is not that we want them to run on their foundation, but it really comes down, you're going to lose your campaign and your messaging. So we try to really marry that together so that they can have a successful campaign. And since 2021, we've helped over 500 people get elected to school board. And that's what has elevated it to the next level of 2022. Dr. Karen and I both started writing trainings. Okay, Laura and Dr. Karen, we've gotten elected. Now what do we do? So Dr. Karen's been really instrumental in helping write these professional leadership trainings, and I'll let her talk about that.
Well, I mean, there's a let me start out with a few misnomers. You don't have to be knowledgeable in education to run for school board. Okay. You have to be a concerned citizen, a concerned parent, a concerned grandparent, someone who wants to improve the education within your community. And I will say that, if you are going to run for school board, then you need to know what you stand for and stand on it. And because sitting on the dais you will have some ups and downs, to say the least. There will be some within your community who try to demean you, and some who try to support you, or not support you and support you, I should say.
Okay.
And so you need to understand what you're there for, and let those leadership skills shine through and be developed. Be that voice. Don't allow others to silence you. You are an elected school board member. You have a voice and a vote, just like every other member on that board. And so these are kind of the things that we need to instill within those who were elected, and to know what their authorities are, where their authority and responsibilities come from. I'm all about the state constitution and the state statutes and code. I mean, that's where you begin as a member. Understand and read through those and understand what they give you, because each state is different. And like Laura said, we're a national organization. So we, dive into the different states with regards to their constitution, and letting them know that, article such and such in your state constitution is on education. And then we go into their state code or their state statutes, however they define them. And there's where you find all of your responsibilities, your authority, the pecking order within your state. Maybe you have a state board, maybe you don't. Maybe you just have a state superintendent. Maybe you have a state department or don't have a state department. I mean, there's variations within every state. And so as a leader, you need to understand where you're coming from, what your authority is. And I know I'm being a little redundant here, but just being, that gives you strength. I'll say that gives you strength to know what you can and can't do and stuff. And just being, don't go along with the crowd. Know your policies, because as a school board member, you're responsible for ensuring approving on policy. You're responsible for the finance, the budget. Even though the superintendent spends the money, you as a school board member vote to approve that budget. So you have that fiduciary responsibility there. So, and then, another thing that's misnomered is, or mistaken, I should say, is that the superintendent is equal with the school board. No, the superintendent is not equal to the school board. The superintendent works for the school board. They're an education advisor. They are more familiar with the operational aspects of your division, probably, okay, unless you came from the system as well. But they do not tell you what to do. They advise you what your options. They should be giving you options on what's best, what's nominal, what's minimal, whatever the case might be. But you as a school board member have to decide the direction that you want the school board. And so there are great opportunities for you to lead in that. Even though you're a lone voice, be that leader. Laura.
So that's a highlight of what we really get in there, and we mentor and we provide these professional developments, because we have school board members that have been newly elected. Then we have school board members that have been sitting on the dais for a term, but they've received bad training because there are associations out there that are so aligned with the public school system that they're very protective of the status quo. So they train our school board members that you're here to support your superintendent. Your superintendent's the education leader. And basically, that's how we've gotten into this overall norm across these school boards of just accepting and rubber stamping everything that the superintendent brings across your desk without really questioning it, because we have been pushed down to not question. Well, that is, as an elected official, as someone that you took the oath to monitor and oversee and guide and direct, if you don't get in there and ask questions, you're not going to be able to be an informed leader. So one part of our National School Boards Coalition across the country is we bring together school board members and we mentor them and we offer them professional development trainings, and we really just come beside them to give them the tools that they need. And every day we're always talking about a new training that we're going to have to write. And that's how we ended up writing our School Board Leadership the Right Way, is the 43 chapter professional development for school board members, but it's also great for anyone that's looking at running for school board.
Mm-hmm.
Can people find that on your site? I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
2 ways that they can find it. They can go to bestined.org and they can order it there, or they can find it on Amazon. And if you do order it on Amazon, we just ask that you write a review, because we love to hear your opinions. And that's the benefit, is when you go through our website, we can get your feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Dr. Karen, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. And, to just kind of elaborate a little bit more, since Laura brought up our School Board Leadership the Right Way, it is not just a book to read and sit on the shelf. It is a book for you to read and reread and reread, because it is full of information. And I don't know, I'm sure a lot of people are like me. I read something and I may comprehend a little bit, but then if I read it again, then I comprehend a little bit more. So it's that cycle of learning and understanding that this book, I think, is for. And it's not just for school board members. I think that anybody who's interested in education, it is a good read, because it opens your eyes to things that you normally would not think of that you would have to deal with as a school board member. I'll throw out a couple of examples. My career was in federal procurement. People typically have no understanding of contracts. All school boards deal with contracts in some capacity, whether it's for facilities, whether it's for, maintenance of some sort, or whether it's for consultants. You need to review, as a school board member, you need to be aware of what you're paying for and what you're getting. What is the return on investment for that contract? You're spending taxpayer dollars. So, that's something that we introduce to a lot of school board members, that, and a lot of them are kind of surprised about it. And then another thing is it's escaping my mind, but it's the nepotism. Mm-hmm. Nepotism that goes on within a school district. Okay. Yeah. Be aware and cognizant. Yes, there are some school districts have a policy with regards to nepotism, but is it being followed? And how close or far does the nepotism go within, your district, if you come across that and stuff? So these are some of the nuances with regards to being on a school board and dealing with more than just policy and finance and hiring and firing a superintendent.
Well, and I think it's important to really highlight, as we're talking about getting involved, because we want to be more, as Christians, get involved in areas of, no one ever said that Christians weren't supposed to run for office and get involved and craft policy to protect our students. And that's one area that we have seen, and that's why a third of our trainings is built around understanding finance, budget, and budgeting, because when we buy our curriculum, whenever we're hiring and putting these positions in place, like DEI coordinators and all these different things that we approve at the dais in our budget, we have the authority to stop that before it even comes into the school districts. But if you don't know to look for it, or you don't know how to read the budgets or to read the contracts, that is how these things are getting passed through. And that's why it's really important that as you sit on the school board, and it's important as parents and community members to understand how to read these budgets so that you can identify. A lot of times as school board members, we're so busy doing certain things that we might have missed it. And it takes an entire community to help us protect our students from things like that. So it's, as we're looking at the things that we do as Christians, I really just encourage you, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to run just because you're not a polished public speaker. Don't be afraid to run because you don't have the doctorate. I'm going to tell you, our school districts are full of PhDs, and where are our students whenever it comes to the level of quality education? It does not require a PhD. It requires someone who's willing to get in there, do their homework, step up, be bold, and advocate for our students. That is what we really need. We need men and women of God to get outside of that fear zone, because we know where fear comes from. It doesn't come from our Heavenly Father. It comes from Satan himself.
Amen.
We have to step up, step out. Doesn't matter if you're afraid, and get involved. That's what I did. Whenever I would go to these school board meetings, I would bring my little kids with me. And by the time I sat down, my kids would ask me if I was okay, because they thought I was crying at the podium. And I would tell them, no, that's mommy's nervous voice. But whenever it comes to our kids, it doesn't matter. We just need to step up and get outside the fear and, worrying what people are going to think of you. And just, it's time to protect our kids. And I think about Revelations 3:16, not hot or cold. We can't stay lukewarm anymore and worry about what people think of us, right? That is where we're losing a generation of our kids to all this indoctrination that's occurring.
Amen.
Or I think one of the tragic things that I learned about when I stepped up, the school where our girls were, there was a lot of nepotism for the school board. It was a private, independent school, so they handpicked who they wanted on the board, and I never even dreamed of doing that. Maybe I should have. However, I just didn't know enough about that, so that's why we're doing this. But what I found with a lot of the parents, they figured, well, my child will be okay because we'll talk about it at home. What they're teaching, just because they're teaching sexual diversity is okay with Jesus. And I'm like, and then they would go home and say, no, let's look at the Bible, and your body is the temple of God. I say, well, what about all the other kids who do not have, a background in understanding of what Scripture says, and they are just following the culture? Don't you care about them? So a lot of parents would just feel like, well, my child will be okay because we have a stable home. They learn these things at home about family, but we don't care about everybody else. They don't come out and say that. So I love what you're saying, because we need to get involved, because it has to be about the rest of the children. Yes, maybe your children will be okay, but what about everybody else's? The ones who fall through the cracks, the one who has parents who don't talk to each other, or alcoholism, or maybe there's child molestation going on in the family. Don't you care about them? Somebody needs to step up and speak up, get involved, because it affects the entire community, and then it affects the culture. Once it gets out of the schools, it affects the whole culture. So,
well, I found, because I do have 4 children, and I have a wide range of the ages. My oldest right now is 33, and my youngest is 16. So I have a 16, 20, and 21-year-old. What I do know as a Christian mom, and as my husband he's a Christian dad too, taking them to church every Sunday and every Thursday for youth. But what happens is, it's around the middle school age. We were very cocooned and protected them during the earlier ages. And then as it got into the more middle school ages, the influence really started ramping up because of these students that our kids wanted to hang out with, and because those parents didn't have the same beliefs, is that, as your kids get older is when you're really going to start seeing the struggles if you don't protect them from those ideologies that are being that drip campaign. We all know that when you turn on a faucet and the drip over time will fill up a whole bathtub. So even if it's just the little drip campaigns here and there, eventually that gets into their spirit. And when they're around other kids that have been brought up that way, then you start seeing a resistance. And those are resistance that we don't want to have as parents, and we don't want our kids to have to endure a lot of struggles that a lot of other kids have because of constantly being influenced from that stuff.
Very true. Very true. And I mean, kids are easily swayed. Something that looks fun and nice, and I find that all children want to be loved. I remember one of my favorite things to do when I was on the public school board was to read to the elementary students. And I typically read to kindergarten, first and second grade. And I remember this one little boy came up to me, so innocent, and he hugged my legs and he was like, "Oh, I'm so happy you're here," and stuff. And that's how children are. They're so innocent, and we corrupt them. We allow others to corrupt them because there is not that foundation. There is not that faith. There is, and I also will go back to, we were talking earlier about, just because you send your child to a Christian school doesn't mean the curriculum is, going to be, there is worldview curriculum even in Christian schools. And, if we don't pay attention to that and have the leadership, and, you mentioned the leadership at the school that your children went to. Well, if you are under a church as well, if you're a school under a church, then you not only have the leadership of the school, but you have the leadership of the institution as well. And so what are the values and the foundation of those 2 levels of leadership, or that 1 level of leadership? And if you don't have it, then there is the opportunity for Satan to come in and just kind of tweak that a little bit and move that over a little bit, or whatever, however you want to phrase it. And so we need to be, I always say, I pray for boldness and courage and wisdom and discernment. Those are 4 things that I continually pray for, because I think they're so necessary living in this world that we live in.
It's true. So both of you have been on both sides. You've been parents, and then you've been on school boards. With I guess starting in 2020, 21, we started to see parents come out in droves, angry, understanding what was in the curriculum that they never knew about, but because things got ramped up in 2021 with the transgender ideology, with the inclusive, all kinds of things that made parents upset that it was being shoved down the throats of their children. What happened? Can you tell us, parents were going to the school boards and the school boards would cut them off. They would not speak to them. They said nothing. And it seems that they are supposed to stand for the community and listen to what the parents said. Some of them wouldn't even tell the parents that they were having a meeting. They wouldn't let them they would have meetings behind closed doors. So where was the breakdown there? What happened? How does the school board get away with that?
Let me just say this, because there have been several of us, and even early on, as soon as COVID hit, and things started shutting down, and they started modifying the classroom or modifying the situation. To me, the best thing that happened, and I'm not the only one who says this, to me, the best thing that COVID did was it woke parents up to what children were being taught, because they had to go home. They were online. Parents were in the other room. They could hear what was being said on their child's computer and stuff. And so I think one of the major disruptors is the fact that COVID came in. They had to modify their classrooms. Parents actually saw what was happening. They weren't happy with it. And the system always wants to perpetuate the status quo. They do not want the apple cart to be upset because things are going along the way they want. And like Laura mentioned earlier, the curriculum, the publishers have control of the curriculum. The organizations like the NEA and the NSBA and some of these the state organizations, they have control of the system as well as some of the politicians. And so that all came together and just caused a clash. So Laura, I'm sorry, I think I interrupted you.
No, and so I was serving on the school board 2016, 2020. And so when I left the school board in 2020, obviously it was March 2020, whenever the schools started shutting down because of COVID. Nobody really knew much about it. And thank goodness we had a governor like Governor Ron DeSantis that said, this is wonky science that we're following. And then he told us to open back up in August. Well, that wasn't the case across the country. Across the country, schools stayed closed. You have like Chicago that stayed closed for almost a year and a half. And then so what happened during that time was the parents did start going to these school board meetings saying, open my school up. My child is going into depression. They're not learning. We're paying you to educate our students, open the schools up. And so while they were sitting there in those meetings, they started listening to what contracts were coming across the desk, what positions were being hired, like the DEIs and things like that. And then it opened up that next that Pandora's box of, okay, we have a bigger issue here that's on the horizon just besides opening schools. And I think those really involved outspoken parents, that is when they started really taking it to that next level. And you see some other organizations start to pop up and talk about this. But one faction that happened during 2021 or 2022 was whenever the National School Boards Association come out and they met with the Biden administration. And they wanted to figure out how to stop all the parents from coming to the school board meetings, because we're going to keep our schools closed no matter what the parents say. So the administration got together with this association, the school board association, who should be representing the community. And they decided to issue a letter that says that we basically want to put our parents on notice that you're going to be investigated just like a domestic terrorist if you don't stop showing up to these meetings and speaking out the way you are. So they pretty well sick Merrick Garland on these parents. And that's when it blew up. Parents are like, if that's the way that you're going to be, we're going to take our kids out of the public school system. And we're not only going to take them out of the public school system, we're going to use our energy to advocate so that every child has the funds to follow the families. And that's why you saw in 31 states now we have ESAs where parents can take their kids to a private school. And during that time, Dr. Karen and I, we were already working on school board elections, and we already were writing curriculum on how to support our school board members. And so that was really where we launched the idea of our National School Boards Coalition, because we needed an alternative to those school board members who don't have the same political alignment with the National Association, that want to put our parents into the same bucket as domestic terrorists for speaking out for the well-being of their students. So there was a lot that happened in 2020, and it really did wake up a giant, and it was a good giant that needed to be woken up. And it needs to stay awake. Just because our schools are open, just because 31 states have ESAs, there's still 51 million students in our public schools. And so we as caregivers, we people of faith, we still have to care about these kids, just because our kids might have the access to an ESA.
So how can school board members get away with being silent? And is it because they thought, okay, these are terrorists, so we don't have to answer to them? How can they get away with that? Because they did. I watched live school board meetings happen, and they just sat there and stared at the parents, and they never responded when asked questions.
Well, when they're on the dais and it's public comment period, they are not to respond. That is a time for the public to voice. Okay. Now, during that time, when the school started shutting down, a lot of school boards allowed 5 minutes for public comment per person, but then they reduced that to 3 minutes. A lot of them did. And I would say the majority did. And so they were looking for other ways other than calling them domestic terrorists, because that really blew up in their face when they did that. So they started looking for other ways to shut parents up. And one was to decrease the time. Another one was to move the school board meetings to the daytime when parents are working, so that you wouldn't be able to participate. So, they were trying to be a bit creative, but I think it was the tenacity of parents and organizations that said, no, we're not going to let this go. No, we're not going to agree. I mean, it started out with the masking and the vaccines, mandatory masks, mandatory vaccines. Well, I didn't get the jab. I never planned on getting the jab, and I would never make my child get the jab either. So it was, that kind of started it. And like Laura said, it just kind of opened Pandora's box, and more things started coming to light. And we have got to be, even though things seem to be calm because we have the Trump administration, it is not. It is not. They are still working. They are still advocating for their evil ideology that is mutilating and harming our children. So we cannot give up the fight. We cannot just sit back on our laurels and say things are doing fine right now. So
no, now's the time to make a move when there's the chances of you not getting thrown in jail like all the others did, at least for this small window. So it's like, okay, here's your window. So we have to move very quickly into positions. And that's why I love what you all do, how you are preparing parents. And what would you say to grandparents who don't have children in the school system? That's an argument I've not an argument, but that's just an argument coming back at me when I ask people who are grandparents, well, why don't you go to the school board meeting? Why don't you get involved? And the answer is, well, I don't have any children there. And I'm like, so what? Your taxes go there. You're still paying for that. Don't you have a say and your grandchildren may end up having to go to those schools. So what do you say to that?
Well, what I say, because we live in a community where there are a lot of retirees, and I do get that from people. Well, my kids don't go to public school. Well, you do pay taxes. And the other thing that I remind them is that, well, do you want kids who are less than 50% proficient or not proficient at all? Because we do have some inner cities around the country that are 0% proficient in math and writing and stuff. So and so what I say to them, they're going to be your future doctor. They're going to be your future financial advisor. They're going to be your future plumber and electrician. Do you really want people who can't read and calculate and comprehend and think to be giving you financial advice? I don't. So and I don't mean to be snarky about it, but I just can't comprehend why people, to me, educating our children is the most critical issue in our society. I mean, yes, there are other issues that are important, but if we do not have an educated populace, then what does that do to our society and our communities?
Well, I really, when you really drill down to it and you speak with individuals that might not have students within the public school system, I think that's a level of their confidence is, well, I don't have as much vested in it. And then whenever you really waken that up in them, yes, you do. And what I love about grandparents is, as parents, here we are, we're running our kids back and forth to school, after school programs, we're working. But really, and I wish I'm not there right now because I'm still a mom with kids at home and grandkids, but you have the time. But more than that, you have the life experience. And like I said before, being on the dais is a lot of common sense that you're going to need, and the boldness that you'll have whenever you go into the school board. So we really do encourage you to get involved in your local community, start going to the school board meetings, start listening to what is being said at these school board meetings. Even a lot of communities have them on the local network. So even watch it there or on YouTube. Start learning what's going on the school board. And then start looking at when are the dates of the elections, because typically the way it is half are elected one year and the other half are elected the next year. So take a look and see, okay, I live in District 3. When is my election? If I was to look at running, it might be a year away, but that's okay. That's when you start really educating yourself on the issues. You really learn, is this someone that I don't want sitting on the school board? And then you can really start doing your homework. But it really starts with start listening to the meetings. Take a look at when your local elections are. When is your district up for re-election? And start talking to people around the community about if you could change one thing in your local school district, what would it be? And you'll start hearing a lot of things, not only from parents, but the taxpayers in the community.
Yeah. Well, when I served, I did have grandchildren in the schools. Now I have great grandchildren. And I am so blessed that my granddaughter has decided to homeschool her children. So, I don't know if that will carry on to the other grandchildren, but I was serving while I had grandchildren. My kids are grown and gone, had been grown and gone for years. So yes, I mean, we should be concerned about every generation, because the Bible talks about your fathers, your fathers' fathers, your fathers' fathers' fathers, and succeeding generations. And we do have a responsibility to teach and raise up, not just our children, but we have a responsibility to those future generations of children as well.
That's right. So what are your closing thoughts, ladies, and advice to people who they're considering, well, that might be a good idea. maybe I should get on the school board. What are your closing thoughts? And then we'll tell people where to find you so they can sign up.
You always have to start it with prayer. You really need to go before the throne of God and ask for clarity if it's meant for you to serve, or is it meant for you to support someone else to serve in that position. That is the number one that you need to, number one step. The second step is, after you've had that conversation with God, is you take it to your spouse, and then you have that conversation with your spouse, because your spouse is your partner in this, and you want to make sure that you are aligned. But after that, I would just really say the next level of advice is start getting involved. If you've not been on a committee on the school district, sign up to join a committee on the school district, because as a candidate, you really need to show that you have some background experience, and that you're not just someone that's stepping out and just putting your name in the hat, and you really don't have any vested interest in your past.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
And I would ditto everything that Laura has said. And don't be afraid. Fear not, for thou art with thee. If it is what you believe that the Lord is leading you to do, then surround yourself, reach out, find some help, like Best in Ed, and within your community, who aligns with you and what you want to support as a candidate.
That's really good advice. And I would say, if you just can't, and it's just something you can't do, support the people who are running. Learn about them. Mm-hmm. Take them to lunch, find out where they're coming from, how they understand the school system should work. Let them know about Best in Ed, and they can get educated in their own state, their own county, their own precincts. So we can find your book on your site and on Amazon, but it's probably better. Is it better for people to go to bestined.com, or is it
.org? It's bestined.org. And they can order it there. We love it whenever individuals sign up and order it through the website, because that's how we stay connected with them. Mm-hmm. But our email, if you want to reach out to us, I'm at president@bestined.org. And then Karen, your email, I always get it, Dr. Hiltz.
Dr. Hiltz at bestined.org. Yes.
Okay. And so do you have like training sessions online, or do you just go to certain areas and where people have to find you?
So we do have online on-demand trainings. We have trainings online live, and then we do in person. We do have some trainings coming up in Oregon and then also in Maryland over the next few weeks. So I would encourage you to come on our website and just follow our schedule.
Okay. bestined.org. Thank you so much for what you are doing, ladies. You're making a difference in this world, because like you said, Dr. Karen, it is the next generation of accountants and financial advisors and doctors and attorneys and everything else, even firefighters. And they need to have a solid education to make discerning calls on what they're supposed to do at any moment in their professions. So thank you both for taking time to be here.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
God bless you.